How's everyone doing today? My name is Mr. Charles, and I'm the lead instructor of the Upbeat Academy. We're a 501c nonprofit based in New Orleans, founded in 2012, and our mission's goal is to instruct the youth in electronic music production using various DAWs and to help them to have a grasp on audio production. Today, we're going to be covering Ableton Live basics and an introduction into music production overall, different philosophies, and over the next couple of weeks, we will be covering different techniques in creating mainly hip hop music, but this can be translated into different genres. So, first things first, what is a DAW? I know some of my students are watching and they're saying, "Oh, Mr. Charles, you always bring up what a DAW is. What's a DAW, as some folks would say?" Well, a digital audio workstation is an electronic device or application software used for recording, editing, and producing audio files. What does that really mean? It means that in any workstation, you have the ability to record external audio. This is something like using the microphone we're using right now, or plugging in an instrument, or even doing something as simple as holding a microphone on a piano, and recording that and bringing it into a digital space. So taking something that's in our physical world and bringing it into a digital space. So when you hear different people bringing up DAWs, they're usually talking about what we're looking at on our screen right now, Ableton, or FL Studio, or GarageBand, or Cubase, Pro Tools. All of these different programs are digital audio workstations. Digital audio workstations have been around for many years at this point. They've been around since, I think the earliest one was in the 1980s, late 70s. And now most producers use some form of a digital audio workstation. You have what are considered standalones, where you don't need to use a computer to utilize it, or you have computer-based DAWs where you require software such as Windows or Mac or Linux to run it. Excuse me. And what we're going to do, what we like to do as producers, is what I like to tell everyone is that production is not based on the equipment that you have. It's not based on the tools that you have. The most important thing in creating something that moves someone, because at the end of the day, as a producer, you want to be able to provide a soundscape to move someone. And the most important thing to do and to remember is that without your ears and without some sort of experience, you won't be able to do that. You can create some sort of computerized algorithm and drag and drop and make a beat, but without context, without experience, you won't be able to create something that moves anyone. So when we're going through our DAW, there's a couple of main things that we need to understand. There are two main types of files that we will be manipulating. We have what are called audio files, and these are the files that are recorded in the real world, manipulated, and then and then imported into a program. So an audio file can be something like a recording. Let's say here's something with some voices.
Oh.
This is from a New Orleans bounce kit. This is
And the beat go. Break it down.
These are all voices that have been recorded in the real world, right? We also have pianos and other types of sounds that can be manipulated and brought into our program and used to make a beat, right? We can't change the notes that were played. We can change the speed. We can transpose it. We can change it up. we can't change the notes that were played already. So this is a file that can be manipulated um, using audio effects. So I can put different effects on this. I can manipulate it by reversing it. I can change the length. And I can just do different things to it. So we can manipulate audio files and different types of audio files to produce something, or we can use what are known as MIDI files. And MIDI files are a little bit more esoteric. A MIDI file is a event message and data that specifies the instructions for music. So if we let's simplify that. What does that really mean? A MIDI file really is a complex musical note. When you look at sheet music as a musician, there are notes on a page. There's a tempo marker, there are the measures, there's the actual note itself, and then there's the length of the song. So MIDI files are the computerized version of sheet music. So I have a number of MIDI files, and all these will be included in a link under the video. You'll be able to access these sounds and import them into your project files so that you have the ability to follow along with this lesson. So if we're using MIDI, we can use a different types of instruments to make the same amount of sounds, right? The same type of sounds. So let's say we're going to use some chords. These are what's known as a B major chord, B major 7 chord. And if I play it by itself, you don't hear anything. But take a look at this. These are the notes that are being played. You know, there's an A, a D, an F, and then an A sharp note. But if I add an instrument here, and I'm going to go into my instrument rack, and this is in every version of Ableton, there's an instrument rack, and I put a piano on it, I'm going to put a grand piano on it. We now can hear the note, see? This is the chord that's being played. Now, what happens if remember the audio file, we can't change the instrument that's being played. We can't change the notes that are being played. But with MIDI files, there's endless possibilities. We can change the instrument. So let's try this. This is a violin. Or we can use different types of synthesizers and sounds. So this is a 808. So that's more of a bass sound, right? And this is something we might use. And we even have the ability to change the notes of the file. So let's go back to this piano sound that we had here. And I can change the sound. So watch this. I just changed that chord, right? So when we're creating, ideally what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have every option available to us. Some producers will say, Well, Mr. Charles, if we have everything open to us, will that become overwhelming? Well, no. I believe that it is important to have multiple avenues to get to the same result. You have to be able to use audio files to create an instrumental. You have to be able to use MIDI files to create an instrumental, because in different scenarios you're going to want different things. If you're working with a bunch of musicians and you say, okay, here's this audio file that I have here, then you're going to, if they don't know the notes, then they may run into an issue of, oh, I can't play this over. Or maybe you're in a situation where you're using MIDI files and you're working with a producer who's mainly sample based, and he's like, okay, these are great, but I want something that is, has a certain character to it, based on it being recorded in the real world. So I think it's really important for us as producers to be versatile and have an understanding of what we can use. So let's dive a little bit. I like to do my lessons in really two parts, where we have understanding and then application, right? So what we're going to do right now is we're going to dive in, have a little bit of history of Ableton right now, and then we're going to put together a quick instrumental using only audio clips. So let's talk about Ableton. Ableton Live is a instrument for live performances, as well as a tool for composing, recording, arranging, mixing, and mastering. Ableton was created in 2001 by two German musicians, and their goal was to create a digital audio workstation that could be used for all of the aforementioned uses. Ableton has been around for 19 years at this point. It's been used by everyone from hip hop producers to electronic musicians to DJs to R&B acts. Everyone that you could think of has used this at some point in time. Um, I prefer this. I've been using it since 2006. It was the first DAW that I learned how to use. I currently use this in concert with different types of hardware, and even other DAWs can be integrated and used. I use Machine as well. So the reason that Ableton is special is it is the first production suite to offer automatic beat matching and crossfading for um, audio tracks, right? So the reason that's useful for producers and for different types of DJs is when you're creating a mix, you want to be able to match the key and the tempo of their song. So when you're doing different types of music, it helps you to utilize different sources. So I think Ableton's pretty cool in that aspect. So Ableton has two distinct views. We have what is called the session view, or what I like to call in slang is the clip view, because this is where you can drop different types of MIDI clips and audio clips, and the arrangement view. And in the arrangement view, this is where you would compose or construct your song, right? You put together the clips here, and then in the arrangement view, you can arrange it into a full composition and not just a singular loop. But there's nothing wrong with doing loops. I personally like, as a hip hop producer, I think that if you have a good 2, 3, 4 bar loop, you can make a great song. So what we're gonna do quickly, and these will be included in the files, is we're going to use a drum loop, a melody loop, and then a bass loop, possibly. So, first things first, one thing that we have in Ableton is we have these different types of tracks, right? We have what is a MIDI track, and we talked about what MIDI was, and we have audio tracks. And this is the default Ableton view: is 2 MIDI tracks, 2 audio tracks, and then 2 effect tracks, return tracks, and then of course the master channel. So for the first lesson, we're going to utilize the audio tracks, and what I'm doing right now is I just deleted. I'm pressing Control Z if you're on PC, Command Z if you're on Mac. I am deleting my MIDI tracks because at the end of the day, what I want to do first is I want to be able to create something just bringing in an audio track, because sometimes you'll have people who work with you where they'll be able to give you drum samples, or they'll be able to give you melodies, and if you don't know how to manipulate them, they won't be any use to you. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this search bar and I'm going to type in drum loop and see what pops up. And depending on the type of music I'm making, I'll choose different types of sounds, right? So if I'm making like a dance song, I might use some drums like this. And I'm going to use these right here. I think these are nice drums. Okay. So one thing you'll notice when I imported this in is it automatically set it as a loop, right? And what does that mean? A loop is where the audio will continuously play back until you press stop. So we'll start from one point, the 1-1, and it will re-trigger itself at the end of the phrase. So what we're gonna do, what I did was I used this gritty committee drum loop made by the producer J-Rob. And then all I did was I went up here to the tempo and I changed the tempo to 90. If you notice, in this audio rack, there's different information. There's segment BPM. This is the BPM that the loop believes that it's in, and the computer says that it's in. It has this warp button which allows us to snap it to this grid that's here. See this grid? And then there's different types of modes, and we're going to get into this a little bit later, because once we jump in to the different types of racks, it can get a little bit hairy and weedy. So mainly what we care about is understanding what the BPM is of the clip that we have and matching it to our master BPM of our whole project. So what I like to do is, depending on the tempo, we can do this 2 ways. When you're creating dance music in 2020, let's say you're for some reason you're watching this in 2040 or 50 or 60, and you're like, oh, I want to check out this Upbeat Academy video class. I want to have you understand that there's really 2 different types of ways to look at beats per minute. We have what are I consider double time and half time. In double time, let's turn the metronome on and you can kind of see what's going on here. So in 4/4 time, I consider this half time of this BPM. This is 180, so this is twice. And then if you space this out, so let's listen to these at 2 different tempos, right? If I go at 90 and I play this beat, check this out. It's swung so all the snares aren't necessarily landing. All right, then if I double time that, press this at 180, check this out. It's unlistenable almost, but let's say I double that, ready? It's the same. The drum loop goes the same way. It's really fascinating. So when you hear producers talking about, oh, I make my beats at 135 beats per minute or 140 beats per minute, they're talking about 70 beats per minute, 65 beats per minute. It's the same. It just depends on the division of the grid, the division of the notes. So instead of a note being at 1/8, an eighth note, it might be at a fourth note if it's double time or half time. So what I'm doing is I'm setting my project at 90, which is 180 double time. And these are the type of tempos where you had like Juicy or any of the 90s hits, R&B hits. You have Anderson .Paak, people like that. They do their stuff around this tempo, between this and really 105, 107 beats per minute. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for a melody. So I have these drums I really like. I really like this because it has a lot of movement. It's not directly snapped to the grid, and what I mean by that is quantized, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And it has a lot of soul. It makes you want to move your body, move your head, bounce your head, right? So what I want to do now is I want to look up a melody loop, and this, again, these are going to be included. I could go about this two ways, right? We could use songs that have already been used, like songs that are composed, what are considered samples, chops. And if you're doing hip-hop production, a lot of folks use samples. Now, the danger of this is that if it's licensed audio, that you can get in trouble with copyright. Hence why a lot of people create their own samples using MIDI. But as long as we don't sell this and we don't mess around with it, we can use this for learning purposes. So I want to create a dance track using different types of quote unquote chops. These are samples from already pre-existing audio. Hello. So let's try this. And if I press play, look. Come on and go with me. Come on over to my place. Come on and go with me. I don't necessarily like that because it doesn't feel like this other drum loop. I think this feels more like a dance. It feels more upbeat and happy, personally. So let's look for something that's a little bit quote unquote warmer. Right? We have different types of things here.
Whoop, whoop, whoop,
Okay. So remember what I said about this grid and the BPM. Listen, okay, so this is how it originally sounds. Listen how it speeds up based on the beats per minute. Okay, so right now what we're doing is we're just creating a loop, right? So we are picking out our sounds. This is our drum, so I'm going to rename this, and this is the way to rename something in Ableton is Control R or Command R on your keyboard, and I'm going to call this drums. I'm going to call this melody. Now, for a beat to, in my opinion, to be finished, you need bass. So what I'm looking for is my melody is in D minor. See, D minor. And I need a bass that's in D minor. So what I'm doing is I'm looking through my library and typing in the signature for D minor. And these are bass sounds that are D minor. This is interesting. Let's see what that sounds like. So that you notice that's in D minor, but it doesn't necessarily work. That's because it has this tone in it that doesn't fit. So what we're gonna do is we're not manipulating the audio. So we're gonna just grab another bass that doesn't have an overtone to it. Let's just hear how this sounds. I don't necessarily like that. So what I can do though is I think this end is not very good. I can shorten my loop. So check this out. Let's hear what this sounds like. It's a shortened loop. I like that. I think that sounds pretty decent. So mind you, what I'm doing right here, we're not going to get into mixing. Mixing is where you change different qualities using EQ and compression. All I'm doing right now is I'm changing the volume of the different tracks. Okay, so we have our bass, we have the drums, we have melody, and we just used only audio loops. Remember, we can change our pitches and get different outcomes. We can also reverse it and shorten the loops and create different types of sounds. So check this out. We create a different sound from it. We can change the And now instead of it being this happy melody, it's sad, based on majors and minors. So let's revert this back. So reverse, take that back there. And then other things, you can spice this up. You can add other things that are in the same key. Maybe you'll add other drum loops to it. Let's hear how this sounds with it. This is a different type of.
You got.
Perfect. So, just to reiterate, this is a DAW, digital audio workspace. In a digital audio workspace, you have audio effects, you have the ability to create your own notes utilizing MIDI, and you have the ability to manipulate both the MIDI and the audio clips that you create. What we did today is we created a composition utilizing only audio clips. We manipulated the tempo, and we manipulated the length of a clip. And then finally, we added in different types of clips to create a little bit more complex of a composition. Thank you very much. I hope to see you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the next couple of weeks as we journey into audio production together. And remember, be well and stay upbeat.